Hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to start this video on the bike here, and I want to talk really quickly about short shifting and quick shifters, because if you're watching this video, you know what we're doing is installing a quick shifter today. But just to re-clarify the difference between short shifting and a quick shifter is, you can see now I am not touching the clutch. I'm at fairly reasonable high RPMs, and I can shift by letting go of the throttle, kicking up into the gear, and then getting back on the throttle. So that is what you would call short shifting. A lot of people say that's bad for your bike, and I would agree. If you do not do it correctly, it could be bad for your bike. But if you're at a reasonable RPM and you're good enough on and off the throttle, you can quick shift pretty easily. And that's normally how I shift. Now, a quick shifter, you don't have to let go of the throttle. You just keep holding the throttle down and you click up, and it'll automatically disengage the engine for you, just like you would if you were rolling your wrist off the throttle. The quick shifter electronically does that for you. So that's the difference. That's what makes it kind of cool. In my experience, like I said before, they seem fairly clunky and they don't always work perfectly. Today, I'm hoping to prove myself wrong with this GYTR. We're going to install it today. I'll show you guys how to do it. I believe it's fairly simple, fairly easy. Freaking beautiful out here. And I would say that in many instances, people don't like them simply because they think that it works at all RPMs, and it doesn't. It is only for higher RPM to racing, which is why I say they're not necessarily practical for the streets. You don't necessarily need it. It's not going to make your ride day-to-day commuting better by any means, because you shouldn't be using it if you're at low RPMs. You should only be using it when you're high in the rev range. So enough jibber-jabber and bullshit. Let's get in the shop. Let's get this done. The first step for the quick shifter installation is to get these two panels out of the way. The main reason for that is the electrical connector is hidden just under this panel here, and we're going to have to route the wiring up through here. So we'll start with this 4mm here on the side, and then right next to the fuel tank here is a little pop pin we need to pop out. We'll push in and just pull it straight out. And then right here up by the front headlight is two more pop pins. We'll push these guys. Get them out. And with those 4 fasteners out, we can just slide forward and lift straight up, and that'll take this guy right out of play. And for the second fairing here, we have two 4mm hex bolts we got to get out. And then after they're out, we just lift up. There's this little nipple going into this rubber piece right here. That's what's holding it in. Next step, take off the actual shift lever itself. And to do that, the first thing we want to do is remove this little rubber boot by pulling it back and around, revealing this little key right here. And lucky for us, it's also a 4mm, and it is on there really tight. Very, very tight in there. And I'm going to cheat to speed up the video here. There we go. Now that that one's out, down here by the other end of the shift rod here is a 10mm nut that we need to break loose. That might help a little bit. Take the shift lever all the way up. There we go. And we'll just break it loose. It's basically a locking nut so that we can take the rest of the shift lever out. And the reason why we didn't measure it is because the manual tells you it's 280mm, so we'll go ahead and measure it. Once we get the quick shifter together and install, we'll go ahead and remeasure it to 280mm. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is put together our quick shifter. Here's the actual electronic component of it. We need this guy, our rubber piece, and a nut. So we'll go ahead and put our little rubber boot on first, and then a nut, which will serve as a locking nut. And then we're just gonna thread the whole thing inside our quick shifter here. And what we'll need from the previous shifter is the locking nut. And it looks like we're gonna probably need this locking nut, and it looks like an 11mm will fit on the top piece. And then our locking nut is a 10mm. We'll break it loose and then unthread the rest of this here. We do want this lock nut here, and we're going to install it on this piece here. And for this one, we're going to need a lock nut on that one, which this is going to be reverse thread too, so we will end up using this bottom nut. Now that we have the third nut on there, put that on, and now we have our shift lever built and ready to go on the bike. All right, now that we have the quick shifter put together and ready to go, before we actually put it on,
we need to remove this top starter bolt here, which is a 5mm. And the reason for doing that is this little bracket came with the kit that is going to go and get installed here. And what it does is it gives us this little spot here for the wiring to snap into. And the torque spec for this is a 12 Newton meter, which is virtually nothing. Tells very little amount of pressure required. And now so we can bring over our quick shifter, and remember this bottom one is reverse thread, so it kind of messes with your head a little bit. And you can see it's getting shorter and shorter, and the main reason for that is because as you put it in here, it's going to take up slack here. So you're going to have to kind of play with it back and forth to make sure that you can get enough slack. You might end up having to take it on and off. So we'll give this a try first to see, and then we'll measure it out and see how it's going together. It still has a little bit of Loctite on it, but we'll put some more on there, just a small dab. Can't go wrong with a little bit of Blue 242. Make sure it's going in nice and smooth and not stripping. There we go. We ran it all the way down. There is a torque spec for it, and it is 10 Newton meters, which is absolutely nothing. But we got Loctite on it, so I don't feel nervous about it falling out or anything like that. So from here to here is where we want our 280mm. And you can get at by tightening or loosening this rod right here. I apologize for my super crude measuring device here. From the center to the center of that nut is right on 280. The next step would be to get all these locking nuts, all these 10 mils, into position, and then we'll tighten them all down. And remember, this is an 11 mil, so you could use this to hold to make sure that the whole shifter isn't spinning as you tighten the locking nut on. And these have a torque spec, and obviously would be a pain in the ass to torque without crow's feet, which I do have, but I'm a little lazy. Just make them snug. The torque spec for them is unbelievably low. There's that one. And then one more up here to hit. There we go. We'll use our really cool measuring stick one more time just to make sure we're still in the right spot, which I would say I am dead on the 280. Get our boot hook back on. All right, looking down in the bike here, you can see this connector here, and it's kind of taped up in here, and we need to kind of disconnect it here because this isn't attached or hooked up to anything. It's for the quick shifter. Take off this tape here, unplug it, and then we'll plug it in and route our wiring. Got the tape off, pull her out like so. Now we got her out. It'll push down, pull that off, and there's our exposed connector. And we're gonna run it under here. And before we plug this in, I am a dielectric grease nerd, and I'm gonna put a little bit on the connector here. Good chance it won't get moisture in there, but there's no reason not to if you got it. So there we go, we got it routed that way. Put it back in the same position it was supposed to be in, and then zip tie it. So if you remember where it was originally, it was rolled up and taped right here. This little zip tie that was supplied is pretty dang small, guys. Zip tie is in. But I think on this side is the right way to go because you're just keeping it away from the engine. I am gonna run my own zip tie in here too. Maybe around the plastic connector, kind of like the tape was holding it, would be good. We were supplied with this little high-speed zip tie here, so we'll run it in there. Preferably on this extra piece so that it's not doing anything to the cable. Now we have our wiring to where it shouldn't be bouncing or rubbing up against anything. Before we finish the installation, put everything on, we're gonna make sure it works. So we're gonna sit on the bike, we're gonna pull up on the quick shifter and hold it, and wait for 10 seconds. So now we have the little quick shift icon. We'll get all the fairings put back on and we'll get out on a test ride and try it out. First fairing here, remember this little plastic piece here? I'm gonna go into that little rubber hole down there. That holds it in place. We have these two little 4mm black hex bolts that go, or hex screws that go back in. This top fairing here, we slide under. It'll set down and then nicely slide back into position. Up here by the headlight, we have these two little push pins. Make sure they're popped out first. Put them in, pop them in. Third little push pin fastener here goes right into the fuel tank. And this little chrome 4mm right here will be our last bolt. All right, guys, that does it. Quick shifter is installed. It was fairly easy. It's done. It's set up. It's ready to go. Now it's time to get it out, ride it, and see what it's actually like. So we'll see you out there.
Having the quick shifter again is making me remember what it was like on my Ducati. I liked it, man. It was fun. feels more of a throttle position than a rev range, honestly. Yesterday it just kind of seemed like anytime I was under 5,500 RPM, it was a little too jerky to be using. I think it's more of a, yeah, right there it was jerky at like 85 or so. So that was just barely pulling throttle. So maybe it's a TPS position that matters more. So let's give that a try. Let's wax her. Yeah, you wax her in first gear, second gear, that's shifting nice. So maybe that's what it is. The more throttle you're giving, the better she shifts, for sure. Okay, that's what it is, guys. It's more of a throttle position than a rev range. If you're not getting it, don't use it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you guys next week. Cheers.